Hello and welcome to the Boston Drone Film Festival. Tonight we have Vic with us in this chat. He's going to be doing a workshop on navigating airspace, OOP, and RID. Vic is amazing. He's going to guide you through different airspace rules that you need to know and how to gain access. Vic has been involved in the USA industry since 2004. He's been a remote pilot since 2016. He's also the owner of Moss Photography, and he has been since 1988. We're very excited to have you here, Vic. And for anyone watching, you can be sure to insert your questions in the chat, and I will make sure that Vic answers them. So I'm going to hand it off to you now, Vic.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to do this. It's fun to do. One slight correction. I've not been flying drones since 2004. It's been 2014. So I don't quite have a 10-year head start. It would be kind of cool though, wouldn't it? Be flying drones 10 years before everybody else. So we're going to do a little chat today. We're going to talk about like you said, some airspace, why it's important, what you need to know. The rules, which is always a good thing, how to identify it, how to get permission when you need to get permission. And when you do not have permission, I'm going to cover that too. And then we'll go a little bit into the new rules that are coming up here next month. In theory, hopefully April 21st. We're certainly going to hope they are. And that's the latest from the FAA anyway. And then if we have time, we'll go a little bit into remote ID. Not too worried about remote ID because it's so far down the road, but we shall go ahead and get started on this fun stuff here with my PowerPoint we've got going here. And if you guys do have a question, they'll be interrupting me. So don't feel like you have to wait till the end on this. We will have a Q&A at the end though, obviously. Alrighty, so we'll just cook right into it here. Let's just do it that way. Who am I? You did a pretty good job of in introducing me there, Jamie. So I appreciate that. Again, definitely a remote pilot, owner of Moss Photography since 1988. Been doing this a very long time, as the gray in my beard shows. I'm also the Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Drone Service Provider Alliance. That's with Kenji Sugahara. I'm a Fast Team Drone Pro, which means I work on the FAA safety team out of the Denver FSDO. So I cover Wyoming and Colorado. I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for UAS Colorado. I work with the state of Colorado when it comes to drone regulations, stuff like that. Y'all have probably seen me on Facebook. And also this year, Kenji and I have been honored to be selected as the first citizen UAS operators on the Drone Advisory Committee. So that's kind of a big deal. And we're hoping to take that places that we can really help this industry. What is DSPA? Kenji and I started DSPA last summer. He reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested. I said, sure. So away we went. And what we're doing is, whoops, I need to do, it says here, sharing is paused. Resume sharing. Did I hit the wrong button here? Anyway, Jimmy, let me know what's going on. Where our mission is to create a positive environment for drone service providers by advocating for reasonable regulation through positive advocacy and increasing the professionalism throughout our industry by providing educational resources and promoting a culture of safety. Basically, we just want to be the voice for the small and medium-sized drone service providers because that does seem to be missing in the industry. So Kenji and I jumped in hopefully to do that. And our motto is a united voice for positive change. And what are we all going to learn this evening? We're going to talk about why the FAA regulates the airspace, different classifications of airspace, when airspace authorization is required. We're going to get a little bit into the Part 107 rules and the 44809, which is kind of the hobby rules, but basically it's the exception to Part 107. And we do have new rules coming in next month, both night operations and operations over people. And then a little bit at the end, we'll jump in and do some remote ID. And that depends on how long this takes. I tend to get a little long-winded, so Jamie may pull a hook on me here and say, okay, wrap it up, in which case we'll just jump right into the question and answers. Okay, you hear the term NAS a lot, NAS, and that stands for the National Airspace System. And that's just not the sky above us. It consists of the air navigation facilities, airports, air traffic control, technology, so the radar and stuff like that. And believe it or not, the rules and regulations are also part of the NAS. So it's not just the air above us when people are talking about the NAS, although most of the time people do consider the NAS just the air above us. It's like, hey, when we're going to go into the NAS, or we can't control the NAS. And that's what they're talking about, National Airspace System. One thing you'll notice if you're in this industry or in this hobby for any length of time at all is the FAA has a lot of acronyms. So I do occasionally tend to slip into the whole FAA acronym vernacular. And if that's the case, just let me know and I will try and roll it back a little bit and talk real talk instead of government speak. So who do we share the airspace with? Obviously, you've got the Southwest and the United and the Frontier and all those folks. And you also have the big corporate and private people out there. So general aviation, you'll hear that term a lot. That's actually who private are. So whether you're flying a drone, whether you're flying a big commercial jet, a corporate jet, or just your little private 172 up there, we share the airspace with them. With helicopters, helicopters are usually the issue when we have an issue with manned aviation. And then, of course, military aircraft who operate on their own set of rules, believe it or not. Now, they pretty much operate under FAA rules, but they also have their own set of rules. And guess who else we share that airspace with? Are the other UAS. So more drones out there. And the longer we do this, the longer we're going to be around, the more drones are going to be part of the NAS, especially between 0 and 400 feet. And we'll get into why that is here in just a bit. But we're going to start seeing the delivery drones and that kind of stuff out there. Not anytime soon, but fairly, one of these days, we're going to start seeing that. Something else we have to keep in the back of our mind. Okay, why 400 feet? Where did this little magic number come from? Well, if you look into manned aviation, they pretty much have to stay 1,000 feet up. And I'm going to use some generalities here, so they don't always have to stay 1,000 feet up, or 500 feet in some instances. Obviously, landing and that kind of thing, that doesn't necessarily apply, and helicopters have some of their own rules as well. But for the most part, manned aviation has to stay above 500 feet. So 400 feet, where did they come up with that? Well, a nice safety margin for something along the size of our drones is a 100-foot safety margin. So 500 minus 100 equals 400. So that's pretty much where they came up with that. That nice little safety feature, that little 100-foot buffer is kind of a big deal, and it comes in handy many times when we're out there flying. So that's where they come up 400 feet, in case you were ever wondering why. And why is altitude so important? One of the biggest reasons, obviously, is if you're really high in the air, it's really hard to hit stuff on the ground. So that's one of the reasons. But also, there are plenty of different manned aviation type operations that take place way below 400 feet. Here, I live in Colorado. We have a lot of crop dusters during certain seasons. And so if I'm flying out on the Eastern Plains here, I really have to be careful. I have to hear what's going on. They sometimes will file NOTAMs, which we'll get into a little bit, but sometimes they won't. Frequently they won't, because they're flying in so many different areas all the time that they don't necessarily do that. So got to keep an eye out for that. Obviously, emergency medical aircraft. I live near a trauma center, about 6 or 7 miles away from a trauma center, but we'll hear the Flight for Life helicopters coming in pretty low. They usually stay above 500 feet, but they might be coming in pretty low and pretty hot. So that's something we have to keep an eye out for. Nice thing here about Colorado is we're at high altitude. So they do have high altitude propellers, or rotors actually. And they do sound. I can usually hear them a long time before I can see them. You're starting to see a lot of power line and pipeline patrols, especially out in California. Most of those are done with drones now, but you are still seeing some done with manned aviation. And then, of course, anytime you're near an airport, you have arriving to departing aircraft. And believe it or not, it's not necessarily near an airport. Like I mentioned with the emergency helicopters, they can take off and land anywhere they're needed within reason. And we also have a lot of times out here in Eastern Colorado and in other areas of the country, we'll have little grass strips, whether they're just like a little farm strip or just community people put a strip together, something like that. So just because it don't show an airport near there doesn't mean we're not an airport near there. And again, more low altitude operations, other drones. So we're going to see those more and more and more. Okay, so we've got a number of different categories of airspace. We've got controlled, uncontrolled, special use like military operations, and then TFRs, temporary flight restrictions. TFRs are pretty important. Special uses as well, although not as much. And then, of course, the most obvious thing we need to learn is controlled versus uncontrolled. So the reason we have those is to keep separation. The aircraft need to keep separation. So ATC, air traffic control, or ATCT, air traffic control tower, their job is to keep the separation of the aircraft. So what do we have? We have 5 different kinds of aircraft controlled airspace. Not all airspace, but controlled airspace. This is a picture of a sectional. Sectionals are good. You need to know some of them, but they're kind of useless when it comes to drone flights in controlled airspace. And we'll talk about a better way to check things here in just a bit.
Hey, Vic,
Class,
I
yes,
can't see your slideshow changing, so maybe you want to click out of it for a second, go back
I
in.
got resume share. Well, this is not good. Okay, let's go to
Maybe just try to get out of it and then go back
let's
into
hit escape, stop share, and we'll go back into escape, and let's try to back into Zoom. Screen share.
Technology.
Technology. And I'm going to go back to that and hit share. Now, what do you have?
Oh, that's beautiful.
What is going on here? Well, obviously, I'm not going to start over.
No, you are good.
So we'll just play from here. Play
Perfect.
slideshow. Now, I am going to check something real quick. Can you see it changing?
No, I cannot. You
Oh,
might
booger
want to get
snots.
out of it and just go to that page and just go to that.
How about that?
Yeah, I think just do that.
That's weird. This is the first time in Zoom that's happened, by the way. So
It's
live video.
You to rely on the most.
Yeah, exactly. I was on a live show this afternoon too, and we were having troubles as well. So that's kind of funny. Okay, where were we? Okay, we have 5 different kinds of controlled airspace. And if anybody has any questions, obviously that you might miss, let me know. So first of all, Alpha is 18,000 feet MSL. You will not be flying a drone in Alpha airspace. MSL means sea level. That means basically 18,000 feet above sea level. I promise you, unless you wear bars on your collar and wear green to work, you will not be flying a drone in Class A airspace. B, we absolutely will be flying drones in Class B airspace. I have a project here at Denver International Airport where I fly in a zero grid. So we definitely need to be careful in Bravo airspace. Let's talk about Charlie. C. It's kind of mid-sized airports. They do have ATC monitoring. ATC, obviously, air traffic control. So they do have an air traffic control tower. And then next is D, Delta. They're kind of smaller, but the funny thing is some D airports are bigger than some C airports. So some Delta airports are bigger than some Charlie airports. And like, for instance, here in Colorado at Centennial Airport is a large Delta airport. And it's one of the busiest general aviation airports in the country. So we have to be really careful around there. And they also are ATC monitored. Occasionally, Delta and Charlie will also not have ATC 24 hours. So that's something you need to check on. Usually something like airnav.com, AIRNAV.com. And last but not least, Class E, Echo. These are non-towered airports. And the only Echo, there's different classes of Echo we'll get into here in a minute. The only Echo we need to worry about really is the actual, it's called E2, which is the airspace around an actual airport. Again, here in Colorado, we have what's called the Loveland Fort Collins Airport, FNLC, or FN, I can't remember now. I think it's FNL. They are an E2 airport. That means they do not have a tower. So when airplanes are flying in and out, they actually self-announce. We have to be really careful in Echo 2 and E2 airspace, and we still do need permission from that. And we'll talk about how to get permission here. And when you don't have permission, as a matter of fact, here in just a bit. The other 2 E's you'll see is the E for extension. I believe that's E4 and possibly E5. Excuse me a minute. That we really don't need to worry about. We cannot even get permission to fly in those. Excuse me a minute while I take some water. We can't even get permission to fly in those, but we do not need permission to fly in those either. A situation where we may be going up into one of the E extensions is, let's say you're going to fly a big tower, a big cell, not a cell tower, but a big, let's say big communications tower that starts out in G airspace, goes up to 600 feet, which still is not an E airspace, but you've got that 400-foot bubble, which we'll talk about in a minute. You are allowed to go into E airspace as long as you're within that bubble. So 400 feet within a structure. I'm sorry. Wow. Been talking all day. Okay, before you fly in controlled airspace, this is really, really, really important. And I'll show you here how to check to see if you're in controlled airspace too here in a minute. But you do need authorization. You need authorization from ATC. So ATC has that visibility that they need to know when there's a drone flight around. Now, when you have your grid maps, which we'll talk about in a minute, they don't need to know you're there, but you still need to get permission to fly there. And how can you do that? One's Lance. I'm sure you all have heard of Lance. It's a low altitude authorization and notification capabilities, I believe. I've said it so many times I can't remember what it is, but that's Lance. That's like Kitty Hawk, UA Sidekick. There's a few other ones out there, but some of the bigger ones are Kitty Hawk and UA Sidekick, things like that. And they do support integration into the airspace. And so safe integration of drones is really important to the FAA, and it's really important to the industry. So we got to make sure we're flying safe when we're in the airspace. And then one more. This I get a lot. Actually, just the other day, I had a problem with this. There is a pilot here in Denver who is a good pilot. He's got some hours under his belt. I thought he knew everything, or not everything. I thought he knew airspace and that kind of stuff. We were talking about something, and actually it was about some of the new rules. And he said, oh, by the way, I got this really cool job right out at DIA in a zero grid. And I got permission to fly. And we got to talking about it, and he did not have permission to fly. He did not get permission from ATC. He checked his Go app on the DJI Go for his DJI Phantom 4, and he was not in a grid area, so he thought he had permission to fly. So it is really incredibly important to understand that just because DJI Go says you can fly, that does not mean you have permission to fly. You still have to go through ATC, go through Lance, go through the drone zone, fill out a 10741 airspace authorization, and get that permission to fly. The Go app is not the end all be all. There are plenty of places around DIA that I can just fly without permission if I just go by that. And that's a big no-no, big time no-no. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about controlled airspace. I don't know if you all seen these. Hopefully you have. If you're a commercial pilot, if you're a commercial drone pilot, you should have. And even if you're a hobbyist, you're allowed to use these as well. But you've got what's called the UASFM. That is another FAA acronym that stands for Unmanned Aircraft System Facility Map. That is the all the airports got together about, gosh, I want to say 3 years ago at this point. And they had to put these grids together. And if you'll notice on the slide there, it has 0 and it has 150, it has 200, 300. And this says a 400 down there in the very bottom left corner. This is Denver. No, this is Centennial. Sorry, this isn't Denver International. This is Centennial here in Colorado. And that means if you're going to fly in that grid up to that altitude, you do not have to let ATC know, but you still have to file for an authorization. So you do that, like I said, through the Lance in this case, much easier than a drone zone. You've got 2 different colored grids when it comes to these things, and every single airport out there has one. Even some of the G airports have them, although they're not really necessary for those. But all these airports do have them. And if you go to a website here, I'll show you in just a minute, you'll see that some of these grids are green and some of the grids are red. These are all green right here for Centennial, like I said. That's because Centennial is Lance active. That means I can go if I want to fly in a 200-foot grid right there off of 470, then I can just go to Lance, pull up Skyward, or go pull up one of the other ones, UA Sidekick, something like that. And I can just say, I want to fly here. And it says, okay, Vic, fly, be safe, we're good. So that's not a problem. But if there are red grids, that means that is not Lance active yet. You'll find all Department of Defense airspace is not active yet. So those are going to be red. Those will probably be red for the foreseeable future. I'm not sure how well DOD really is going to work hard on this. And you'll also see some of the smaller D and C class airports that are still red. Those are contract airports that don't necessarily owned by the FAA or run by the FAA, but run for the FAA by private people. they will or won't. For the most part, they're supposed to be all lands active pretty soon. But if you go to the page, that page right there, the ArcGIS FAA webpage, I know that's not the correct pronunciation, but that's what I call it. You go to that webpage, and I'm not going to give you the website address because the website address is a typical government website address, and it's got all these different dots and slashes, and then after the last slash, there's about 30 random letters and numbers all put together. So what I tell everybody to do in a situation like that is you just Google Visualize It FAA, and that will come up. You'll have basically two links at the top when that happens. The first one is the correct link, and the second one is an FAA link that if you click says, hey, that's no longer here. So in typical government fashion, instead of just getting rid of the link, they just still have the page and said, hey, wrong page. It's basically government 404 in that case. But anyway, once you do that, bookmark that page, because I promise you'll go to it again and again and again and again and again. I probably go look at it, I don't know, 5 or 6 times a month, if not more. And if I'm doing a lot of workshops, then I go a lot more than that. I have a lot of authorizations, so I don't really use Lance that much. But when I need to double check an address, like around Centennial, there's a lot of building that goes on around Centennial, and I've got clients that build there. So I have to go check. And one thing real quick while we're still here is I get this question a lot is, well, what if I need to fly in a zero grid? Or what if I need to fly 250 feet in a 150-foot grid? You can still fill out a Lance or a authorization via the drone zone, but it takes a little longer to get that. And some airports like Centennial here will not give you any authorization in a zero grid. So that's kind of airport dependent. They do not have to give you that particular permission, but some will. Centennial has given me permission to fly 250 feet in a 150-foot grid, and it was in actually their downwind leg, and they just routed all the air traffic over to the other side of the highway for 15 minutes so I could fly. So that was nice of them. But it's kind of cool. But definitely Google Visualize It FAA, bookmark that page, and you'll use it all the time if you fly anywhere near airports. I will warn you in advance that Visualize It, the ArcGIS web page, is a memory pig. Don't try to pull it up on your phone even if you've got a data plan, don't try to pull it up on your iPad, anything like that. You really should just be using this on a web browser because it will crash most other stuff. I mean, it's a great website, don't get me wrong, but a lot of those ArcGIS websites, ArcGIS websites, are memory pigs. The FAA's version of that is no different. Okay, we talked a little bit about controlled airspace. Let's talk about uncontrolled airspace. Uncontrolled airspace is Gulf, that's G, and it's pretty much wherever there's no controlled airspace, oddly enough. And it's usually if it's underneath the echo shelf, which means if you look at this picture here, there's like a little bottom below the 1200, little bottom below the 700. That's the shelf, and you've got your Class B shelf, like an upside down tiered wedding cake. A lot of people describe that as. But Class Golf is from the ground either up to 700 feet, up to 1,200 feet. If you're not near controlled airspace, it goes up, I believe it goes all the way to A in some instances. But again, here you've got these two classes at 1,200 and 700 feet of that echo. You don't have to worry about. Class G, fine. You can fly there without any control, any airspace permission at all. But this is where some people don't really kind of get it. And hopefully everybody will after this. And if not, please, you'll have my information at the bottom. And by all means, please reach out to me. Uncontrolled airspace is not unregulated airspace. So what does that mean? That means there's still rules. You have to be careful. You have to give way to manned aircraft. A lot of those crop dusting missions are in Class G here in Colorado. So I always have to be careful for that. And if you're out someplace again, like the Eastern Plains of Colorado, middle of Kansas, Nebraska, any place, Iowa, that there's nobody around, manned aircraft can fly below that magic 1,000-foot and 500-foot number. So you always be careful. Even though you're in uncontrolled airspace, you are not unregulated, and you still need to be careful and take your time and keep your eyes open and your ears open, because sometimes you can hear things a lot faster than you can see things. Okay, again, but before you fly in uncontrolled airspace, here's a nice picture of uncontrolled airspace. I have no idea where that is. That actually came from the FAA. So again, you don't need ATC authorization. There's no ATC out there. So how are they going to authorize it? Be aware of your surroundings and comply with all rules and regulations like we just talked about. Now, this picture here, especially, there could very easily be a farmer's little grass field somewhere, or a navigation or aerial. Come on, brain. I've been talking way too much today. Aerial application system where they're spraying crops and stuff like that. This is prime territory for something like that. So you definitely want to keep your eyes open and your ears open. Let's talk about TFRs just a little bit. This is something that I will admit that I'm bad about, as well as most other drone pilots, unless they're doing a lot of stuff in very heavily congested areas, around Chicago, the entire state of California, stuff like that. You need to be careful for TFR, temporary flight restrictions. Here in Colorado, we had one last Tuesday when Vice President was here. So there's a rolling TFR. You cannot fly in a TFR. If you really want to get in trouble, bust a TFR, whether you're a drone pilot or a manned pilot, helicopter pilot, glider pilot, whatever. If you bust a TFR, you are in big trouble. They take that very seriously, especially these days. You'll get Department of Homeland Security involved. You get the FAA involved. You get the FBI involved if you do something silly like that. So again, we had the Vice President here in town. Another TFR we're likely to see here in Colorado is wildfires. We had a horrible wildfire season. Not only here, California had some bad ones, Utah, Arizona, a number of different states had really bad wildfires in the last season. And we had a lot of TFRs, a lot of temporary flight restrictions. And that is where you can also get in a lot of trouble, because if they see a drone, they will cease all aerial support in a wildfire. And that's just really bad. I mean, you can imagine if that was your house that the tanker almost saved, but had to go back because there's a drone flying around. So yeah, you get some cool photos, but you also get in some big trouble. Some states, including here in Colorado, have made it a crime to interfere with a first responder by using a drone. And actually I helped write that law 2 years ago. So it's not an airspace violation. It's a ground-based, hey, you need to land that, you're interfering with something, violation. So there's no FAA preemption in a situation like that. So again, tfr.faa.gov will really give you the most recent TFRs. The Know Before You Fly app is also a really good actual, I don't want to say word official, because there's always those little letters at the bottom to say this is not official. But the Know Before You Fly app is a really good app because it's almost they update that almost immediately when there is a TFR. And then of course the other TFR everybody knows, hopefully knows, is it's technically a notice to airmen. It's actually a NOTAM, not a TFR, but everybody calls it the stadium TFR. And that means there are certain Major League Baseball, Major League Football, some NCAA, Division I football, and some motorsports all have an automatic TFR during an open, an open stadium type game. If it's an indoor baseball game, it doesn't count. But 1 hour before, 1 hour after, any stadium that's one of those, either, the football or baseball or motorsports, it's a stadium. Oh gosh, I think it's 35,000 feet. Don't quote me on that, but look it up. I think it's 35,000 capacity. 1 hour before, 1 hour after, there is a 3-mile TFR in effect. So you may not fly there. Now, some of you may have seen my Monday Night Football game drone shot from last year, and that was done during a preseason game. So that's the only reason I could do that then. It was a preseason game, and there was no TFR during a preseason football game, which I thought was kind of cool, which is why I got up there. Okay. Do we have any questions about that before I move on to new rules? I'm not watching the chat, so
no, I think we are good. You can keep trucking along.
Cool. Now that we actually are going along instead of just staring at the same slide. Okay, let's talk something about, we've been doing a lot of talking about both the drone pros and Kenji and myself and a number of other people have really been trying to get these new rules out, or not the new rules. We've been trying to get them out, but obviously we don't have any power in that. We've been trying to get people to understand what these rules are. These rules go into effect, and everybody out there who's listening, please cross your fingers right now. Unless there's another FAA delay, and I've been told it's very unlikely that it will be another FAA delay, but I'll believe it when I see the new rules posted on the website on April 21st. But we do have some new rules coming out. So what are those new rules? First of all, before we get into that, let's talk about the difference between recreation and non-recreation. So 107 flights. The FAA doesn't like to use the word commercial, but that's pretty much what everybody does, uses the word commercial when they're talking about 107. But 107 is the default rule for anything between 0 grams and 55 pounds. So if you're flying a drone between 55 or, basically a drone, anything below 55 pounds, you are technically flying under 107. So you need to have your 107 remote pilot certificate. Unless, and this is really important, unless you can satisfy every single one of these 8 criteria. 2 of them don't exist yet, and 1 is more of a weight thing. But this is the first one that most people get wrong. Unless you're flying for recreational purposes, you are flying a 107 flight. So if you're just out having fun, this is not a 107 flight. You're supposed to fly under community-based organization safety rules. You see a little asterisk there. That basically means they're not quite out yet. They should be out fairly soon. They should be out probably at this point, second quarter, 2021. You also have to fly visual line of sight only. So under BVLOS, I guess I kind of wrote that wrong. You have to fly visual line of sight only. You cannot be flying beyond visual line of sight. So if you can't see your drone, you're not flying recreationally. Now, one question I get a lot, and there's some clarification that needs to be done, is goggles. Now we've all seen the new DJI FPV drone. Do not have one, but I do have other FPV drones. If I'm wearing goggles, I should have a VO with me, a visual observer, somebody watching for me. And in that case, that VO has to be, the term is co-located. That means standing beside you, or at least close enough to yell at you. And they need to be able to keep their eyes on the drone as well. So if you're flying with goggles, technically you are BVLOS, beyond visual line of sight, because you have goggles on, but you do have your spotter, your VO with you, and he or she can keep an eye on the drone for you. And you need to be able to take off your goggles and find the aircraft as soon as you can. Now, I have to put my glasses on once I take the goggles off, so there's a little bit of a time lag there. But you should be able to spot your aircraft pretty soon, your drone pretty soon. One issue we had with a YouTuber is he did a distance test on one of the new drones he has, and he went out very, very long distance, but he had his VO on radio because he was told incorrectly by someone from the FAA, actually, indirectly, that you can use what's called extended line of sight, which is not a technical thing, but pretty much called that, where you can have your VOs on radio and you're still, as long as they can see the drone, you can also fly that way, but you cannot. I'm telling you right now, that is still considered an illegal flight without a waiver, and you would then no longer be flying recreationally. Obviously, you cannot interfere with manned aircraft. I don't know why all of a sudden, if you do that, you're no longer flying hobby, but that's the case. So you're not flying recreational in that case. You still need to fly. You need to get permission to fly in controlled airspace, which, if you remember, is A, B, C, D, and E. There is no F in the FAA. There's one in Canada, but not in the FAA. So you have to get permission, and you can either do the Lance authorization if it is a green square on the ArcGIS FAA site, or you can, as a recreational operator, go to the drone zone, so FAA-dronezone.faa.gov, and go ahead and apply for an airspace authorization. And I'm not sure what it's called in that case because I've never applied for one as a recreational pilot, a recreational flyer. All of mine are flown under 107. But the Drone Zone website, the FAA's Drone Zone website, is divided into 107 and 44809 recreational flyers. So you can get controlled airspace permission there as well. Now, if you're in G and non E2 Echo,
Hey, Vic, I have a
yeah,
fun question for you.
go.
I have Zach in the chat asking a question. He says, not necessarily related, but there is a pilot in my area who flies very recklessly almost daily, i.e., above clouds, out of VLOS, above 400 AGL, etc.
Thanks.
I've tried to reach out to this person, but they've blown me off. And they told him that they can do what they want. Any recommendation on how to deal with this person?
Tell you what, Zach, my email will be at the backside of this. I will tell you the FAA response on this is, and I'm assuming you're not talking about Philly Drone Life. If it's Mikey, he's already in enough trouble. Is educate first, and then if you do get a blow off from the person, then you do need to reach out to FSDO. I do not have the link with me, but there is also an area where you can on the FAA website you can report people. Reporting is a serious issue, and those of you who know me know that I deal with this stuff all the time, and I can't even begin to count how many people have said, "Hey, I need to report this person," or "You should report this person," and across the things that I've come across. I think it's probably been maybe 4 or 5 people over the years that I've reported to the FAA, and that's all because of attitude. The big blow off attitude, or hey, I can do whatever I want. What are you going to do about it? That's when the FAA needs to become involved and gather evidence. Websites, YouTube, Instagram, that kind of stuff is a good place to start an investigation. But unless you have proof that that's the pilot flying, then there's nothing really the FAA can do, is a good way to put it. Because in this country, you're innocent until proven guilty, and it's up to the FAA to prove that that person was flying. So the best thing, again, if you reached out to them and they said bite me, go Google FAA. What is airman reporting, and that will give you a form to fill out. And all reports have to be followed up. So the FAA is not going to blow it off. And it might just be since they can't prove it, if they don't have anybody flying, it might just be hey, Mr. So-and-so, don't do that anymore. By the way, now you've officially been told to don't do that anymore. So if you do it again, you're in trouble. So hopefully that answers your question. If you need more, vic@dspalliance.org is the best way to reach me, and I'll also have the email at the end. Hopefully that answers it. If not, awesome. Sure. I forgot where we were. Permissions.
Sorry, I love interrupting.
No, that's okay. That's why I want you to interrupt. Because I can't follow a chat and talk at the same time, because I'm a guy and I can only do one thing at a time. Okay, so permission to fly in a controlled airspace. We talked about that. Now, if you're in G or non-E2, you have a 400-foot hard limit. For a commercial pilot, for 107 pilots like myself, we have a 400-foot bubble, which we'll talk about in a minute. But if you're in G or you're in non-E2, so you're not in that Echo 2 around an airport, you are at 400 feet, boom, that's it. That means 400 feet from above ground level. That doesn't mean you take off on the top of a hill. Let's say you're taking off on a 400-foot hill and you go straight out 100 yards. Well, now you're way over 400 feet because you're above ground level at that point. So you kind of have to follow the terrain that you're flying with. Now, is that a big deal? Do you have to make sure you're not 401 feet? No, obviously not. There's a spirit of the law and the letter of the law. You need to keep it safe. If you're at the Grand Canyon, which you're not allowed to fly in, and you blow out across the Grand Canyon, you're going to be way above 400 feet at some point. And in here in Colorado, it's really easy doing the mountains. So the last thing that that is a recreational flight you have to follow is the aeronautical knowledge and safety test. And there is another asterisk there. That means it's not quite ready. If you've been following along, the FAA put out a request for test centers applications. I'm going to say 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago at this point. And the end date on that is supposed to be June 1st is when they'll start having these safety and knowledge tests. It may be a little sooner, it may be a little later. Those of you who follow the FAA know that they have and every government agency, I shouldn't say just the FAA, every government agency has a really bad habit of missing deadlines. So if you're flying under all 8 of those things, or at least 6 of them at this point, you can fly under recreational rules. Now, what if you're not? If you cannot follow those 8 rules, 6 in this case, you have to fly under 107. So what does it mean? You have to be 16 years old, at least 16 years old, I should say. For the longest time, the FAA had on their website that you had to be 16 years old to fly under 107 rules, which means you only have 1 year to do your whole career, which we thought was kind of silly. So they changed that to at least 16. And like all manned aviation, or like all aviation in the United States, you must be able to read and speak English, because English is the worldwide aviation language. And so you have to be able to speak that. Your 107, if you're flying under 107, every single one of your drones must be registered. That's one thing we forgot to talk about. I'm sorry. Hey, we forgot the 250 gram rule for recreational. Sorry about that. If you are recreationally flying anything over 250 grams, which is that magic 0.55 pounds, FAA likes to think of 2 sticks of butter. That's basically half pound. You have to register that. But if you're under 250 grams, you do not have to register it. So your Mavic Mini that you got, or your Mini 2 that you got, and you're flying around recreationally, does not need to be registered as long as you're flying recreationally. So you register yourself as a recreational operator, and then you put that single number on all your recreational drones. That is one of the big differences between recreational and 107. If you're flying under 107, every single drone has to have an individual registration number. And we're going to speed this up here because I know I'm running out of time. You have to be physically and mentally able to fly. Do not rely on your girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, or wife to decide if you're mentally able or not, because you know what they're going to tell you. You have to pass your 107 aeronautical exam. You stay current, which means every 2 years you have to take the new recurrent test, unless you take it after April 6th, in which case you take a free online recurrent training. So everybody who is 107 is now really happy. We don't have to pay 150 or 165 bucks every 2 years to stay current. We're now just like everything else, all the rest of the aviation industry. What are the areas of knowledge to fly under 107? If you're going to get your 107, you need to know the rules, the airspace, weather, loads. That means balancing, stuff like that. Emergency procedures. What do you do if you lose lost link? What do you do if an aircraft comes crashing down? Crew resource management, aeronautical decision-making. Those two are very intertwined. Airport operations. Believe it or not, you have to know what airport operations are. Some 107s fly on airports. We've flown on Dallas, Fort Worth runways. So you have to know airport operations, and then you have to know maintenance and pre-flight inspections. So basically how to take care of your drone and how to inspect your drone before you take off. Now let's do this real fast. Data publications, again, they've published, these are the new rules, operations over people and night rules. The recurrent comes into effect on April 6th. And then the new rules go into effect April 21st, sorry. So just because you take your test or your recurrent on April 6th does not mean you can fly at night or over people until the 21st. Recurrent training, like I said, it's going away. These are the dates. It's going to be available on the 6th next month, 21st for the night ops and ops over people. Training will be needed for night ops though. So you cannot fly at night without a waiver until you take the initial or the recurrent after April 6th. You do not need to do this for operations over people. The rest of that stuff we'll just skip through right quick because I want to get to something really important. Here's the night ops. If you do have a 10729 waiver, those will terminate on May 16th. So on May 17th, you better have taken recurrent training because you will need to take it. Operations over people, this is a little more complicated, and we'll just actually do the one that goes into effect on the 21st of April. That is category 1. Now I want to be able to get questions answered too. So this is going to be a problem. I can almost promise you people are not going to understand this rule. So if you're listening to this, you'll be able to understand it and you won't have an excuse. In order to fly under category 1, which is the only category that you will be allowed to fly over people with on April 16th, is that thing has to weigh under 250 grams. So yes, a Mavic Mini weighs under 250 grams. But the second part of that is it must contain no exposed rotating parts that would lacerate human skin upon contact with a human being. That's actually wording out of the rule. Hey, guess what? Those props are rotating and they will lacerate. So as of now, a DJI Mini 2 will not qualify for Category 1 flights because of the rotating parts, which is obviously the propellers. If you put a cage on it to protect the propellers, you are no longer under 250 grams. So the only DJI drone out there right now, if you want to fly DJI, is the Tello with prop guards. You can fly that. I've got a Beta FPV 95X with a Naked 6 on it, a Naked GoPro 6 on it. That is also capable of flying over people. So that's something I will be allowed to fly over. You may not fly over open air assemblies without remote ID, which we will not talk about because we don't have time. So if you're talking about a concert or construction sites, stuff like that, a big plaza in the summer with everybody out eating lunch or dinner, something like that. The only other thing I want to talk about real quick that is confusing, we'll swing through these, and there's so much of this stuff out there on the internet. And if you need me to do something only on this at some point for an organization you belong to, let me know, and I'll be more than happy to do this with a little more time. Operations over moving vehicles. A lot of people think, yay, we can fly over cars now. That is not true. The drones we can use to fly over moving vehicles are tied to the drones we can fly for operations over people. So the only thing you can fly right now, not right now, on April 16th, will be the Category 1 drones, and you may only fly transitory. That means you can fly across the street. You can't fly with traffic down the street. So Category 1 right now is the only thing you can use to fly over traffic. So that is going to be probably a lot of people flying where they're not supposed to, when they're not supposed to. And I imagine drone pros like myself will be getting a lot of phone calls for education. This is the only thing I'm going to talk about when it comes to remote ID, because I want a Q&A if we have time. Remote ID is not compliant until, actually, that's the wrong date. It is not compliant until September 16th, 2023. That's 5/16 is the 10729X date. Anyway, so I have to fix that. It is not compliant until September 16th, 2023. That's more than 2 years away. So when I first start talking about remote ID with people, I tell them, first of all, do not panic. Don't worry about it. ASTM standards aren't out yet, so you don't even have to worry about what's going to be usable. I will tell you that Category 2 and Category 3 have to be certified by the manufacturer. So you cannot self-certify Category 2 or Category 3 or Category 4 drones, only Category 1 drones. So without getting too deep into all this RID stuff right now, any questions? That's my email. You can reach out to me that way.
The email, so nice.
Yeah, exactly. And then these are the two main websites you need to know if you fly drones, the FAA dronezone.faa.gov. You should already have an account there because, well, if you're a hobbyist, you should be registering your drones. If you're 107, you should be registering your drones. So you should have an account there. Yep, register. And also you can apply for the authorizations there. And then FAA.gov/UAS. Everybody should have that burned into their brain because everything drone related by the FAA is on that website. It's a great website. I use it. I just start typing FAA, and the time I hit the third A, it autofills gov.uas whenever I'm on the internet. Okay.
Great.
I tried to go.
Burned it. I'm just going to ask you one quick question.
Sure.
Sign off. But specifically, personally for you, are there any laws you would like to change about drones that wish
how much time we got?
Very want and it would change? What would you do?
BB loss, line of sight. It's very safe to fly beyond line of sight in many situations, but that needs to be adjusted to. I would say instead of calling it beyond visual line of sight, I would say beyond spatial awareness. Because if I'm flying 1,500 feet, I can't find my Mavic anymore. My VO knows where it is, and I know where it is in the sky, but I'd not be able to find that little speck. But I can see all the airspace around it, and I know darn well it's safe. So I would like to see beyond visual line of sight changed.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Vic, for joining us. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to email Vic. I'm sure be open to even emailing this PowerPoint to you.
I can email this one. I can't email my FA ones, but I can email this one.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, Vic.
Thank you,
we're going to
Jamie.
go on to the next panel, but it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you.
Awesome.
For all
well, I'll jump on here in another hour or so and join you on the social hour.
After party.
That's right. I might even have to break a beer out.
Awesome. Thanks, Vic.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great time and fly safe.